Welcome to the Silvercrest Podcast. My name is Judy Morrill, and I'm here with my colleague, Jennifer Baker, who is also a portfolio manager here at Silvercrest. I have over 30 years of investment experience, and Jennifer has 20 some odd years of investment experience, and we're here to talk about women and wealth. And I think we'll start off with Jennifer talking about some of the statistics that are really interesting.
So, yes, women and wealth is a hot topic in the industry now, mostly because women are currently, as of 2022, controlling about 33% of the world's wealth, and that number stands to increase over time. One of the topics that's widely discussed in the wealth management industry is the impending great wealth transfer, where we're expecting to see about $84 trillion worth of wealth change hands across generations through 2045. And approximately 30 trillion of that wealth is expected to be controlled by women going forward. And so it seems like an opportune time to talk about how women view wealth and how they manage wealth and what they should consider doing with their money, or how to plan for that transition, Judy.
I think it's really a really important topic, and I think there's a lot of myths about women in wealth. I think that if you look at the women over 60, there's some statistics out there that say that women over the age of 60 have a pretty low confidence level about their finances, and that women sort of under 40 have a lot more confidence, which is really encouraging to me. It's always been a passion of mine to try to bring women into their own finances and help them understand it. So there's the wealth transfer that's coming up, and there's also a lot more self-made wealth among women, and they approach it very differently than men. And it's neither good nor bad, but it's just a way, it's the same thing in philanthropy, that when women give money to a school or an organization, they want to have a better sense of exactly how that money is going to be used. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think on the investment side, I think women tend to be more, they're risk averse, but in the sense of really wanting to know what they own.
Well, I think two things that you said are especially interesting. One is the age demographic and the difference between women who might be in their 60s or older and how they perceive wealth versus women who are in their 30s or 40s and still maybe in their careers. One important data point that I noticed is a great majority of the women who will come into wealth in the coming 20 years are the spouses of baby boomers, and they tend to be slightly younger than their husbands and might inherit some wealth and also have a longer life expectancy. Yeah. That, coupled with what you said about risk tolerance, is women do have a very different risk profile as intolerance as a group compared to men. And so I think that those two facts in terms of longevity and also risk perception and risk appetite are really important for women to develop their wealth plan or investment plan.
And it's really important as money managers for us who are dealing with clients across the age spectrum. I mean, I've got clients that are, widows, divorcees who have children who are maybe in their 30s. And there's a very different approach to those two types. My experience over the last many years has been primarily with that over 60 group of women. You've got that, the widow or the divorcee whose husband passed away, and she's always outsourced the finances of the family and the investments, doesn't really even know how much money they have, doesn't understand how an estate gets settled, doesn't, and it's not out of stupidity or ignorance. It's just in a marriage, you will tend to capitalize on your strengths, as we know. And so I think for me, it's always been an educational endeavor to help disarm a client so that she doesn't think she's stupid, that she doesn't say, oh, I don't have a head for numbers. I just can't be bothered with this. It's so hard. It's so overwhelming. It's so confusing. And to help them understand that it doesn't have to be that way. And that's one approach, and to be respectful and to be a good listener. And the other approach is that, I've had a client, a partner in a law firm or somebody who started their own business or inherited the family business. And I would say that's probably more the kind of client that you've been working with over your career.
So I would say that is a really important point of comparison. So I think typically the classic example of a woman being in charge of her own portfolio and her own finding her own portfolio manager has been that sort of classic historic case of a divorcee or a widow. But increasingly, we're seeing more self-made wealth from women, and women being the wealth creator. And that happens to be a lot of the types of clients that I work with. For instance, an interesting example is a client that I work with is well into her 80s and ran her own successful business for over 45 years and is now decided to retire, wind down her business. And she's been able to successfully amass a lot of wealth over the course of her career, and a lot of assets, both, real assets and also in liquid investment assets. But she's never had an advisor before because she's had her husband, helping her with manage her investments. He was in the industry, but he's 20 years her senior, and she needs a person who understands what it's like to be a professional woman with a business that has created a lot of savings, but also she's smart enough to know what her area of expertise is and where she needs help. And I think that's where you and I are uniquely positioned to help people, because we can listen and we can help make a plan that makes sense for her situation or her individual situation.
And I think the key word in all cases is respect. And I think that there's a lot of distrust out there. And I, understandably so. It's pretty unbelievable, some of the things that I see potential clients coming in with. And that respect and that helping them, if they come in and they say, I want X, you say, well, let's understand, why do you want X? And what is, I always like to say, if you come in and we put your portfolio to work and the next day the market is down 20%. Now, this is an auspicious day to be talking about that because the markets are going crazy today, just interim and temporary. If the market is down 20 and you're down 10, are you going to push me out the window and then you're going to jump? Or is that, oh, great, it's a buying opportunity? And, there are varying degrees of risk tolerance that I think sometimes a 401k plan or a traditional advisor might just say door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3. And it's so much more varied than that. And I think that when you're approaching managing money for anyone, but particularly women who are much more, they tend to be a little less secure feeling about their money. That's a really important thing to do and a question to ask.
I also like what you said about, an individual situation, and everybody's different. And I think the most important thing is understanding each individual situation, because you might have someone who is very comfortable being 90% in stocks, for example, and 10% in cash, and that suits their lifestyle. But you might have another client who isn't comfortable with that either, and that applies to women, but it applies, I think, across our client base, and it ultimately comes down to really listening and understanding each client's unique set of circumstances and objectives. And you can't really do that unless you have that detailed conversation and understand.
And you can't force something down someone's throat either. I mean, I have a client who inherited money from her mother. Her mother lived to be like 106, and then she inherited this money. And she said she had fled. Her father had fled Weimar Germany, Nazi Germany, and he had been a banker in Weimar Germany. And so you could fly kites with the Reichsmarks, right? They were using it to heat their homes. I mean, there was runaway horrible inflation. And so her whole worldview was informed by that. And her father used to say, never own a bond, never, ever, ever own a bond. And I could not get her to go into fixed income. It was so hard. I think we ended up, before she passed away, we ended up with maybe 10% in fixed income munis, so I'm like, well, you can save on taxes if you do this. And then I have another one who's similar, she's in her 70s and she just doesn't believe in bonds and she wants dividend paying stocks and maybe some preferreds, and that's great for her. And, you're not going to just push something into someone's face because that's the party line. It's what's appropriate and what makes them comfortable, as long as they confirm with you and are aware of the risks inherent in not owning any bonds in a down market.
So it sounds like the top tool in your toolkit, and this is certainly how I feel, is you have to have a plan.
Yeah.
As the client, as the wealth creator and wealth holder, you need to have a plan. And that's the first step. It's finding someone who helps you make the plan and understands who you are and what that plan should look like.
And a long-term goal. And that goal may fluctuate. I mean, I always tell my kids who are, planning out their college careers, let's get a plan for those 4 years. And if you deviate from that plan, it's like a map that you're going to drive from here to Boston. Maybe you're going to stop in Newport on the way. Maybe you're going to, go off to this side street because there's a cute little town, but you know that you're getting to Boston and that's where you have to be in X amount of time. You have to be there by this date. And it's the same thing with money. You have to have a map, and maybe you deviate from that map. Maybe circumstances change. All of a sudden you have a chance to buy a unique property somewhere, or you want to give some money to someone in need. That's fine. But your overall plan is intact. And, subject to change, but you have a map, a road map.
Well, that's right. I think we make plans and God laughs, but so the plan needs to be flexible
Exactly.
too. You never know when there's going to be that car accident on 95 between New York and Boston.
It's going to make it take 6 hours instead of 4.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But I think the plan is where you start.
That's where you start. Exactly. And, pay attention, for women who aren't paying attention at this point, pay attention to the family's finances. If you're in a comfortable situation where you do have someone else paying attention to the money, you really don't want to be caught short. I call it the 3 Ds: divorce, death, and disability. All of a sudden, you don't know where the estate plan is. You don't know the phone number of the attorney. You don't know who the accountant is. You don't know how many checking accounts you have. You don't know if there was a 401k that your spouse or your partner was investing in. Have that readily available. It's sort of a love letter. I encourage, and we have one, here are all the passwords. There are a lot of mistakes that people make thinking, we're keeping our finances separate. We're married, but we're keeping it all separate. And then all of a sudden, do you have power of attorney? Can you get to your husband's checking account or your wife's checking account when you need to? These could be really, at a very painful crisis time in your life. It could be really, really painful and expensive.
I think to that point, it's important to know the professionals that are supporting either your family's wealth or your individual's wealth. You don't want to lose a family member and then pick up the phone and be speaking to a financial advisor or an attorney for the first time in your life.
You have no idea who they are or what
that would not make a very hard situation any better. And so I think another important thing in the toolkit is to make sure you develop a relationship with your financial advisor or portfolio manager and even your trust and estates attorney early as possible. And I can tell you, because a lot of the clients that I work with who are younger, who might still be single and early career, but still high earners and have inherited maybe a little bit of money, they're in their early 30s and they're working with me in the context of their family on a greater basis. But then when they need us, when those life events happen, we're here to help them. And it's somebody they already know and trust and are familiar working with. And I think that's really important too. It's never good to be caught flat-footed and not know who to call and not know the person on the other end of the phone.
And the other important thing is that women do tend to change advisors after the death of their spouse. So keeping them in the loop if you're a portfolio manager for a couple, keeping that spouse in the loop, because they may be, and I had this situation where the client said, I'm tired of, and this is not to sound chauvinistic in reverse, but I'm tired of all these men telling me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of it, and they won't listen to me. And I don't mean this to sound like bad in any way, but this is just her experience. And so she wanted somebody else. And here we were.
I've heard statistics around that too, that it's very common for a spouse to change advisors upon the death of their spouse. It's also very true amongst, second generation, once the parents have passed away, for the children to all want to change advisors. I'm wondering, are there reasons you think that it happens so frequently, and do you think it's because maybe the relationship wasn't developed early, or do you think there's more to it than that? And
I think, I have one situation, and it's not a client, it's a friend of mine, and she does not like her husband's advisor. And so she sought out her own. He's not dead. They're very much alive and very much happily married, but she doesn't really like his advisor. He's good for him, but not for her. And so I think that might be part of it. And it's also just kind of a take the bull by the horns. You chose this person. I think it's time for a change. And I definitely think the next generation, which is a whole nother conversation we can have next time, about kids feeling like, that old ad from I'm dating myself here, from the 80s, this is not your father's Oldsmobile. Trying to upgrade the idea that an Oldsmobile is a cool car. This is not your father's, Silvercrest or whoever it might be, that we're not stodgy, sleepy, old, whatever, hanging out with 80-year-olds all the time.
I like how those 2 points that you made tie back to there's no one size fits all plan.
Yeah, exactly.
And that the plan needs to be flexible, because those are good real life examples of needing that flexibility and what works for one person, not necessarily working for the next client.
And having a good stable of advisors. Sometimes in the previous case where the woman wanted somebody else, they were able to find someone else within Silvercrest, which was really helpful. So yeah, I think we've covered all of our points as far as managing money for women. And, we've got experience with all the generations. And I don't know if there's anything else any other points that you wanted to make.
I mean, when I think about this topic, I think back 20 years and starting out in this business, and what advice would I give myself as a young female professional in financial services? And I sort of wonder, what advice would you have given yourself when you started in the business? Because we've had a similar career path. We've both worked in wealth management for quite a long time at a couple different firms, and we've both been to graduate school, and we're both raising families. So what would you tell your 22-year-old self?
I would tell my 22-year-old self to get serious a lot sooner. I mean, I hate to admit this, but one of the things I think that makes me very good in this business, especially with women, is that when I was young, before I got my MBA and really got involved in finance and found it fascinating, was I made all the classic mistakes. I didn't save enough. I did not start saving for retirement soon enough. I, played around. I had some, just not understanding about debt, not understanding how credit cards worked. And, so I give advice now to my kids' friends, and one young woman in particular who has a big job and she's working all the time, and she thinks maybe she wants to go to business school. And I sat down with her and I said, okay, what's your student loan debt? What are all these things? And she's doing everything right. And she just needed that affirmation. But that's what I would tell my 22-year-old self, is to get serious a little sooner. Not that it hasn't all worked out beautifully for me, but, you can't know when you're 22. I didn't even know when I was 22 that I was going to end up in this business. But if I could have just started putting that retirement money away, even 5 years sooner than I did, it would be a very different story. So
I think that's great advice.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was great talking to you. It was fun. Yeah.